Hi, my name is Patrick. I have an 86-page world building document. Fuck. I want to talk about the world that I've made has a world building document that's 86 pages and counting. Editing me is here to tell you that I didn't storyboard this at all. Big mistake. Oh, wait, I'm still recording. Welcome to my planet. So, a little bit of background information on just generally what is happening here. So, oh my gosh, do I have to talk? I guess I have to start talking about the universe. So, essentially, we have the ever-expanding universe, right? Which we're just going to represent with a circle. Well, there's kind of two universes going on. There's the material plane, the immaterial plane, and they're kind of juxtaposed over each other, but separated by this curtain. And the curtain is thinnest at the center of the expanding galaxies. And this is going to be confusing because it's a cycle. But when there's nothing, this curtain warps and drops a bit of the immaterial plane into the material plane. And that drop creates a cascading effect, like a ripple effect. It's like a ripple in water. Imagine hold on. Does that look like a water droplet ripple? Does it? Am I bad at drawing? Does that look like a water droplet? Okay, point is, when the curtain warps, it creates a ripple, which spreads out. And as it's spreading out, it's consuming the nothing that exists there and makes something. And the something could be anything. The something is like anything. It's just space and time, essentially. Now, as long as there is nothing, some nothing to consume, it's gonna keep making something until at this point there is no more nothing. So then the curtain warps again. It's all something, and then it creates another ripple effect of nothing. So if we were to have a graph at this point in the universe, guys, this is really abstract. Okay, so this is our graph of something against nothing. At this point, nothing, well, actually, it exists a lot, but then it'll go down. It's like a cosine graph, like this. And why the fuck am I talking about math right now? And at these points, at the points of no, not the points of inflection, that's here. At the vertices, the critical points, when the tangent line is equal to 0. Okay, calculus. That's when a ripple happens between the material and immaterial plane. Now, the immaterial plane is, the material plane is the one that's fluctuating like this, between something and nothing. The immaterial plane is essentially everything that could have ever existed or was thought of or dreamed of or anything exists in the material plane. So it's in the material plane, we have something and nothing fluctuating. In the immaterial plane, it's just everything. Everything that ever was, is, or has been just exists. And so that's why this drop... So the concept of nothing also exists in the immaterial plane. I don't know if I feel like getting into that. We're not going to worry about that. But essentially, that's why this drop comes from the curtain warping between the immaterial plane. Now, no conscious being can exist in the immaterial plane. If you dream about somebody in a dream, that they technically are in the immaterial plane, but that is a mimicking of the person that you're dreaming about. Because it's like, if you think about it, the perception that everybody has of you in their head isn't actually you. All right, we're getting deeply philosophical here. This is like ultimately besides the point. The point is, everything exists in the material plane and stuff fluctuates like this. Okay, we got that? Great, okay. Why did I go into that? Oh, okay. So, there's two types of beings that are really kind of like the most like eldritch, I guess, the most removed from everything, or like all powerful. We have the Kranaku, who only exist in the fourth dimension, in time. They move through time, they cannot interact with the third dimension, they are in charge of making sure that time progresses. And that's where they exist. We also have the emotional beings, aka the outer beings. I later on in the world building decided I wanted to call them the emotional beings. So you might hear me referencing both, but these govern the third dimension. They rule over space, they rule over time, if that makes sense. Kranaku are time, emotional beings are space. Essentially, that's like how I think of it. So there are, I think 14. There's 13. Okay, so there's 13. And they each kind of represent an emotion. Who would have guessed? So the main two, I'm gonna say all of their names, but the main two you have to know. So our main two are Halcyon and Monoluk. Halcyon is the being of calm, Monoluk is the being of content. Okay? Those are the two you have to remember. Now the other ones, I'm gonna try and read off, but they're all kind of like crazy names. So Halcyon, the being of calm, Monoluk, the being of content. We have Gawudira Charis, the being of joy. We have Sahe Lipimosha, or Sahe Laipaimosh. Sahe Laipaimosh, the being of sadness. You can tell I was going crazy on these names. Anyways, we have Nostos Himwe, the being of nostalgia or longing. We have Pararese, the being of loneliness or emptiness. Ein Fulong is the being of empathy. We have Neospiro, which is the being of inspiration. Enteos, the being of excitement. Angravex is the being of anger. Angravex. Yeah, real creative with that one. Gevar Farin is the being of fear. Perichomenoleas is the being of discontent. And then the last one, Ankonus, is the being of paranoia or suspicion. And those are kind of the 13 that I landed on. But again, two most important ones written right here. So these 13 beings, they just kind of like, they move around and do stuff in the material plane. And some of them like have a crazy number. They make stuff. Like they make planets and shit. So like some of them make so many planets. They're just like freaking going and like making as many planets as possible. Like Enteos, the being of excitement, like girl, they're just fucking planet, solar system, star, nebula. Like they're going. But others, like Halcyon and Monoluk, they don't really do that much. They're chill. So Halcyon and Monoluk both technically have made one half of a planet. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Halcyon made one planet. Monoluk made 0, technically. Halcyon made Galdora. That's what I'm trying to say here. And then Halcyon and Monoluk were working together. And Halcyon, because Monoluk wasn't really doing much, and so Halcyon was like, yo, Monoluk, do you want to, like, be the watcher over this planet. And Monoluk was like, hell yeah. So, yeah, that's what they did. Halcyon made Galdora in a relatively calm, a relatively empty part of space. There's not really many other planets, star systems, whatever around. And Galdora is like a relatively small planet orbiting around a stable binary star system. I know the physics of it all. It's just two small stars of the exact same size and density, so they basically are grouped as one, orbiting around each other. And then way out here is Galdora. Which, yes, the size is not, it's not right. But just roll with me here, okay? There are no other celestial bodies in this star system. And now you might be wondering, hey, so like, what about like the moon? Because the moon, originally I made this world for D&D, and there's a lot of stuff that's based off the moon. So I was like, okay, I need a moon or some sort of celestial body. And that's what Monoluk does. Monoluk kind of is the watcher of Galdora. Halcyon is going off, just kind of like fucking around somewhere else, not really doing anything. But Monoluk is watching. And that's like, she's effectively a moon. It's like a faint glimmer of something in the night. And what would be a moon is Monoluk. Her essence, her being, if you will. This hair is really bothering me. Anyway, so yeah, that's where we start. So now we're gonna get into like actually like Galdora existing. I don't know how else to put it. Like the history. I guess we're gonna actually get into the planet because Galdora is the focus of our story. This was just background. So similarly to how the whole universe exists in a cycle, Galdora also exists kind of in a cyclical nature. So Halcyon, our guy, not really our guy, our entity. If I reference Halcyon as a guy, I apologize. Halcyon is an entity, but just know that for the future. So Halcyon, main entity here, experiments with Galdora. Galdora is their main experiment, like as a whole. And so for any number of times, kind of like an unfathomable amount of times, Galdora has some sort of apocalyptic level event that kills off all life, and then Halcyon has to swoop in and restart. So this has happened like so many times. The one key difference about the Galdora that we're going to be talking about is that for the apocalyptic event, that apocalyptic level event, instead of waiting for it to end and then restarting, Halcyon stopped it mid-process. This is where we get the implosion. Essentially, the core folded in on itself, which started then exploding out, which split the crust of Galdora into 7 pieces, and they started being expelled. 7 main pieces, there's other ones, but 7 main pieces, and they started being expelled out from the center of the planet. And then Halcyon was like, wait, they swooped in, they created a gravitational anomaly at the center where the core used to be, took out like most of the debris on the inside, and just left the 7 main plates floating in space, curved around each other. So like, how do I even draw this? Effectively, this is what like the world looked like, but imagine it like 3D, and there's a gravitational anomaly in the center underneath this plate, and they're all orbiting around each other. So effectively, it's the same as tectonic plates moving. And to that extent, sometimes plate crashes will happen where the plates like ram into each other, and it's kind of just a mess. So this event, the implosion, catastrophic. It's like it was supposed to be world ending, but then Halcyon was like, this is my world, I can do whatever I want, and then stopped it because yeah. But now let's talk about the actual, like, how did we get here? How did we get here? Okay, so going back, we're staying on this save file of Galdora. That's effectively what's happening here. Halcyon is just like creating new save files of the same planet. Stitching this together is gonna be so interesting. I'm like I'm excited but also scared for like what that might entail. This save file of Galdora is around 20 billion years old. Life appeared on Galdora 8 billion years ago. So it takes some time. You know, there's a lot of shaping that has to happen in order to make the planet suitable. Consciousness, Halcyon was like, yeah, this is fit for consciousness, only around 3 billion years ago. Is that clear? Do we understand that? Because I'm probably going to erase this. It's kind of irrelevant to the rest of the plot, but whatever. I literally just talked about fucking warping of the material plane. I think we're fine. Also, right around 3 billion years ago, something kind of like abnormal happened that later propelled Halcyon to want to continue or like stop the implosion. And this event was a crossover event between the Krenaku and the people of Galdora. And I know I said that the Krenaku only exist in the 4th realm, and they do, so just roll with me on this one. But essentially, Aeon, this guy, was just kind of fucking around, and fantasy magic happened that I have yet to explain. And somehow, through a stroke of divine intervention, a warping of time and space, something, this guy managed to impregnate a woman with quintuplets. Look, it can't be a fantasy landscape if there's not some weird relationships going on that are deeply questionable, also creating like a absurdly large amount of kids. That's normal for a human. So Aeon somehow impregnates Yair, which you can see where this is going. Eon, year. Anyway, she births 5 kids. These are the half Krenaku. These half Krenaku exhibit qualities of both the 3rd and 4th dimension. So they're like Krenaku, where they can exist in the 4th dimension. And I'm using 4th dimension to represent time. I don't know if that's scientifically accurate, but I don't care. So, they can exist in the 4th dimension, but they also have 3rd dimensional figures. And they can they can basically time travel effectively. And they also can influence the 3rd dimension. And that's what makes them really special. I just drew on my pants. These are the 5 children of Yair. Anura, Edig, Idlox, Ovplov, and Utik. Each of these kids got a month named after them. Because time works differently in Galdor. There are 5 months. Okay, here's our breakdown of time. A year is 5 months, which is 30 weeks, which is 240 days. I'm not gonna go through the rest of this. A day is 30 hours. It all divides out evenly, and I did that for the sake of ease of math, because I'm tired of 365.25 days in a year. Who decided that? Bad world building. Okay, yeah, so the half Krenaku each have a month named after them. Anu, Edig, Lox, Plov, and Teak. And those are the 5 months. The half Krenaku come back later. They kind of like fuck around for a while, but they come back. later for more. More happens with them, I promise. About 2 billion years ago is when conscious creatures started being born, like with magic. And now we have to start talking about where magic comes from in this world. Mind you, this is before the implosion happened. So Galdora is still a normal planet. Let's remember that. Galdora as a planet has its crust, right? Beautiful. It has some fucking magma, whatever, stuff. And then at the very middle, the core, this is made out of what the Galdorians call, the people of Galdora call Galdorium. Galdorium is a inherently magical blue rock. It's like electric blue. It exists at the core of the planet and grants the entire planet magic. So if you're kicking around long enough on Galdora, you'll have access to magic at some point. The Galdorians don't know that Galdium exists yet. We're gonna get there. If you're like picking up on like what the implosion was and where Galdorium is. Did I say Galdium? Oh my gosh. Me not knowing my own world building. You can kind of put 2 and 2 together to see like what I'm implying here, but that doesn't happen for another 2 billion years. Also around this time, we start getting our first like actual communities of different people. Notable one has not occurred yet. Me when I lie. Sorry, y'all. Right now, I haven't written anything for anything between 2 billion years ago and the year 7,500 PI. There's a massive hole in my world building right here, but we're not going to talk about that. That's for another day. I don't like that, actually. I don't like this plot point. I'm just going to get rid of that. I got rid of this plot point because essentially what I said was, at this point, this world save file was created and all prior history was lost, but I don't like that. So I'm going to say that this save file has existed and I'm going to live with a plot hole that's 2 billion years big. So nothing that I have made happens until the year 7,134 PI. Now you might be like, Patrick, what the hell does PI mean? And this is where I get into our date system. So we're looking at things from after the implosion. That's our perspective. I think the farthest into the future we've gone is 70 years after the implosion. PI means pre-implosion. Pre-implosion. It's just, this was 7,134 years before the implosion happened. Are we following? Okay, great. After the implosion, we get MT, which equals modern times. Really creative. I know. 7,134 years pre-implosion, the first notable community forms. And by notable community, I mean community that this whole time I didn't have this light on. Hi. And by notable community, I'm of course talking about the first time, the earliest I've ever written about in this story. So in 7,134 PI, we get the Gem Dwellers. The Gem Dwellers, you guessed it, dwell in gems. So actually, do we hate this light? Because it's reflecting off this whiteboard. Everything's reflecting off the whiteboard. I'm so sorry. Okay, so the Gem Dwellers, they live in gems. Now, I haven't gotten into the geography of Galdora at all. So it's time to go into geography. A little segue into geography. Geography. This is what we're gonna work with. And it looks like a child trying to draw the internal organs of a human being, but we're just gonna have to go with it. I hate that this light is reflecting on this board, so we're gonna turn it off. Okay, so essentially what's happening here is this is water. This is the Great Galdian Sea. There is one ocean. This is Pangea. We're Pangea in this bitch. This connects on either side. In the middle, we have a massive fucking lake. What did I call it? I don't actually know if I've ever named this lake. Okay, but there's a really big lake in the middle. And out of it, there are obviously tributaries that connect, like, everywhere. But the most notable are these two right here that kind of split this eastern edge of the world. And then also one that runs north and one that runs south. And then it, like, connects down here too. But, like, these are the most notable tributaries. This is the caldera of mountains. These are marble mountains. They encompass around an area, and then there's, like, a big valley in between. This is very fertile land in the middle of here because all of the water evaporates and then gets trapped by the mountains. It's like a reverse rain shadow effect, where usually you would see a desert in the middle, but due to magical fantasy means, it's actually very fertile in the middle. So, yes. Down here, we have a bunch of canyons and deserts. Also, fun thing to note, the climate starts cold up here and then gets warm down here. So let me write that. Further north you get, the colder it gets. The further south you get, the warmer it gets. Like so. So this is like deserts, canyons. These are all canyons. And this is like the deepest parts of the earth are here, and the tallest parts of the earth. The deepest parts of Galdora are here. The tallest parts of Galdora are here. In the middle, we have like savanna, plains. Here is where we start to get a little foresty. Over here is big meadows. These are big meadows. And then here's where we get really snowy stuff. There's mountains around. It's kind of everything up here is like essentially snow-capped. These are like the polar ice caps. Anyways. So yeah, that's the geography. The gem dwellers exist around this lake. And I know this is confusing because I already have dotted lines. But they exist around this lake because around and in this lake, there are massive amethyst geodes that exist peeking up into the surface, but also down in the surface. Or like down under the crust. So, yes, the gem dwellers exist in these big amethyst geodes. Their whole lifeblood is around mining amethyst. That's like literally their whole thing. And this is important because amethyst coin is effectively the same as what gold coins are in D&D. So they're the primary form of like buying and selling. They're the currency. Amethyst coin. So because these gem dwellers exist in the gems, and they're constantly mining them and trading them, they basically have control over like the entire economy of Galdora. If they wanted to, they could just put in extra hours and bankrupt everyone and crash the global economy. That's a good plot line. This is important for later. This is important of later. Everyone look where this is happening. Okay? We good? Cool. Cut to about 134 years later. Also, society at this point has existed for 2 billion years. So people are like pretty advanced. Like they're like pretty advanced. Like there's machinery, there's kind of like futuristic tech stuff. There's a lot going on. So 134 years later, in the year 7000, we get the first person to discover that Galdorium is at the core of their planet and will give them magic. Yay! We discovered where Galdorium was. That definitely won't be a power trip for anyone and won't cause any problems and won't make the entire planet implode. That's definitely not where this is going. If you think that's where this is going, we're gonna move on. They don't know how to extract it yet, okay? So this whole time they're trying to extract this Galdorium. They don't know how, but they know that it's there, and they want to get it. They fiend. Is it fiend? They really want Galdorium because they know it gives them magic, and they're like, if I hold that, will it give me magic? So around, oh gosh, I can't do reverse math. I don't know. But in the year 6,890 PI, and they had a whole year system that I am not going to explain before the implosion. Just know that I've thought about that, though. In 6,890 PI, Angronto, the Amethyst Dragon, wakes up from his slumber in one of these amethyst geodes that had, to that point, remained untouched, and realizes the state of Galdora, of the world. Angronto is, like, focuses on, like, graviturgy and whatnot. That's, like, his specialty, I guess. I don't know. And so he gets mad. He's like, yo, what is happening? Y'all should not touch Galdorium. Leave it where it is. The world is in balance right now. Like, please don't touch that. And so, as a show of his fury, he uses his, like, dragon magical powers. A fantasy magic moment. Anyway, excuse me. And he lifts all of the amethyst geodes out of the ground and levitates them into the sky and leaves them levitating there. So the whole terrain here, fucked up. There are now floating amethyst geode mountain things in the sky for the next around 6,890 years. Also, fun side note, there were people in some of those and on some of those that also got lifted into the sky. They formed their own civilization that was totally detached from everything else because they were physically isolated. What is that speciation event called? I don't know. There's an ecological term for it. I think it's like allopatric. Is it no, it's not I guess it would be allopatric speciation. Anyways, they get entirely isolated from the rest of the world, and they form a community known as the Cloud Dwellers. Creative, right? They're living in the clouds. That's a whole other side tangent. I can talk about that another time, but yeah. So at that point when Angronto does that, everyone's like, this is not good. They think Angronto is bad, and so they start a war that lasts until 6,700... Why the fuck did I make this year so specific? 719 PI. So from 6,890 to 6,719 pre-implosion, there's a war going on right here between the Galdorians, Angronto the Amethyst Dragon, and a bunch of other dragon constituents, and it is a mess. Now, in the year 6,801 PI, mid-conflict, Atlas the Great is born. The Great, of course, bestowed after, he lived, because that would be really funny if they birthed him and they were like, you're Atlas the Great. Anyways, so Atlas the Great was born amongst the Gem Dwellers, who are no longer really Gem Dwellers. The ex-Gem Dwellers. Oh gosh, I guess they would still categorize themselves as the Gem Dwellers at this point in time. The under-Gem Dwellers, because their gems are floating in the sky. I didn't even think about the economic implications of them not having access to their currency anymore. Except for the currency that is already circulating. 6,801, Atlas the Great is born. Now, it's 6,719 when Atlas the Great is, in fact, like, 80. Actually, it's 6,720, so when Atlas is, like, 80. Atlas conquers Engranto, the Amethyst Dragon. And he does this by essentially... It's like an outlash of magic where Engranto gets bound again into an Amethyst Geode, but at the same time, Atlas gets banished to the Feywild. So nobody ever sees him again, but he still exists for a very long time. At this moment, when they like collide and Engranto gets bound to this Amethyst Geode, and Atlas gets banished to the Feywild, Atlas and Engranto are now, like, tied. They're, like... Their mortality is connected. So Atlas won't die unless Engranto dies, and vice versa. Yeah. So, yeah, Engranto is now in a floating Amethyst Geode. Nobody really knows what happened because they just heard, like, a massive boom, and then both of them were gone. They were like, okay, well... our amethyst is still up in the air, so like, but the dragon's gone? I don't know. Point is, that happened. So that war ended, and then I have another massive plot hole. It wouldn't be a world-building video if there weren't years and years of massive plot holes. So, the war ends in 6,719, because, you know, it takes a minute for them to realize what's happened. And by a minute, I mean a year. And in 439 PI is the next plot point I have. So, again, it's not a 2 billion year gap like the previous plot hole, but it is 6,300 years. Oh, we're getting better about the plot holes. But from this point on, there's still like 100-year plot holes here and there. Look, okay, this is a relatively new world. Every day I work on it. And I'm very focused on the present. I live in the present. 439 PI, where we moved past that war. And the fierce 5 factions formed. We remember the number 5. When have we seen the number 5 before? Yeah, and her 5 quintuplets, her 5 children. Yeah, I told you they would come back. They are coming back, and they realized that there are effectively like deities in this world. They have a lot of power. So, and they've been watching what's been happening, and they're like, you know what? I want to have a say in that. I want to control people. And not all of them are like control people, but some of them are like control people. So, the Fierce 5 factions form. They each take a portion of land in Galdora and claim it as their own. And some people don't like this. And so they move, or they, you know, go into hiding, or the different Half-Grananku react differently to people not liking it. But we get 5 factions. Fierce 5 factions are Itlonia, ruled over by Anura, Gald, or the nation of Gald, ruled over by Edig, Ferufesto, ruled over by Idlox, Okaion, overruled by Ovplov, and Univerk, ruled by Utik. I didn't label where these are, but we're just going to start with the top. Itlonia, Anura. So around this time is when the Half-Grananku, they've always had a reputation for certain things that they like specify in, because people have like, they've been deities, but now they run a nation. So they've had reputations, and now they're accentuating that. So each of their nation kind of like upholds their ideals. So Anura is the Half-Grananku. She focuses on protectiveness and affection. And so, as you might have guessed, Itlonia exists surrounded by the protection of the Marble Mountains. So yeah, this is Itlonia in this caldera here. Also, technically, this area outside, hello, sirens. So Atlonia is like this circle. She has some land area outside of these mountains, but mostly it's inside the mountains because they want to be protected. So that's her area. The nation of Gald. Now, do we remember what I was talking about? The land area in which, most of all of the money is controlled? We remember that? Yeah. So that area is where the nation of Gald is. The nation of Gald focuses on wealth, essentially. Edig is he kind of presides over wealth and ambition. That's like his whole thing. So they exist where all of the money would be. Unsurprising. I set that up, but whatever. Idlox is known for her resolve and spirit. And so she kind of has this land area down here. This is Ferrofesto. That's where they reside, in the south. Next up, we have Okweo-Kion. Okweo-Kion is ruled by Ovplov, who's known for his charisma and joviality. So they have the seas. They take to the seas and take the seas. And they have a little bit of land here, but it's mostly seas. Also, there's islands, of course. It's not just blank ocean area. Like, they have islands in the ocean. Whatever, me with the blue marker. I have a better, more intricate map, but just for now, this suffices. Okay, so lastly, we have Univerk. Univerk is ruled by Utik, who's going to be purple. Utik is known for their foresight and ability to see into the future and resourcefulness. Univerk exists in the north. And this is how the Fierce Five factions are split up. We have Okweo-Kion, Atlonia, the Nation of Gald, Ferrofesto, Univerk. Does that make sense? Hopefully, yes. So each of these nations is kind of known for different things. Atlonia is known for taking in refugees. Anura really likes taking care of her constituents. She rules over Atlonia by essentially being like a presiding justice. And the people who didn't really like or like want Anura to be ruling over this area moved to this space, the area outside of the caldera here. Yeah, and they kind of stay there for a long time. Then Gald is very focused on wealth and stuff, and that gets messy later. It does, it gets so messy. It's siblings, they're quintuplets, of course they're gonna fight. And essentially their playground is just like the entire planet. So that's fun. Yes, they're obsessed with wealth. Ferrofesto, Gald will do anything for more money. And they rule by like a blood monarchy, I believe. So essentially Edig appointed somebody at the beginning of his rule to like do his bidding because Edig's trying to make that moolah. And so now it's passed on through blood monarchy. Because that's what Edig decided. Okweo-Kion isn't really ruled by anyone. It's overseen by Ovplov just to make sure that nobody does something crazy. But being they're the most nomadic out of all of them. They're in charge of trade. They own the seas. They know the trade routes. They know all of that. And they love a good trade. They love a good sea shanty. It's a grand old time in Okweo-Kion. And Ovplov is just one of the guys there. He loves to mess around and just kind of hang out. So yeah, he's always on a ship, traveling between people. Or island hopping, you never know. And then Ferrofesto, started by Idlox, is very intense. They love their land area. Most cities in Ferrofesto are kind of they're run by like a military. It's like a military oligarchy. Is that like a thing? I don't know. But Idlox is head of, like, she's like the commander-in-chief. She like sends people out to do her bidding. She's always playing Risk. Like, to her, this is a big game of Risk, and nobody else is playing. But she is treating it like everyone is playing, but nobody wants to play. She is intense, ferocious, and very passionate. Very, very interesting gal. And then I talked about Okoye. Why did I skip? Whatever. Univerk is the most protective. They reside a little bit above ground, but they're primarily below ground. Utique set up a system where essentially it's like they have like a president effectively, but they have like a physical and mental test in order to appoint the next president. Because Utique is trying to maintain stability there, and they really I don't know. It's just like they're preparing for the worst. They're like doomsday planners, which in this case pays off. But Utique can like see into the future really well and really clearly. Mind you, half Kanaku, they're time beings. And so Utique is really worried about all that. So, yes. Now, that was a long tangent just to talk about the formation of the fierce factions. In 324 PI, so again, 100-year plot hole. It wouldn't be me without a 100-year plot hole. 324, pre-implosion, a council called the Robust Inventor Council gets formed. And effectively, they're scientists from all across Galdora, all across the world, who are uniting in order to make judgments about the further scientific advancement of Galdorians and what they think is safe and what they think is not. It effectively is the World Health Organization, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it. So yeah, they do that. The Robust Inventor Council. Guys, guess what's happening? This year, there's a 200-year plot hole. 200 years. I do think that if I flesh out this timeline more, Galdor would feel less empty. But whatever, who's got time for that? So, 103 PI, we get this guy. There's so many people. Marquester the Visionary. He got that title. I have reasons why people get titles. Should I do that side tangent now? No, it's fine. Marquester the Visionary. He theorizes that Galdorium can be mined and used to grant magical powers. And he proposes like how that could happen. He kind of reads this off to the Robust Inventor Council, and they're like, okay, this is not a bad idea. This could maybe be potentially good. It could also be potentially hazardous, seeing as it is at the core of the planet. That's very difficult to get to. And the core is like the focus of stability. Like, some people are against it, some people are for it. But mostly it's positive feedback. They're like, okay, yeah. And so in 75 PI, again, 25-year plot hole, the first bit of Galdorium from the center of the planet is mined. They successfully pull out a tiny, teeny little bit from the planet's core, and that sets off the Galdorium Wars. I mean, not like immediately, but this is like the first step towards that. It's not until about 10 years later that they actually begin. It takes 5 years for them to refine the craft, and so Galdorium mining becomes more common. 67, I made this before 67. In 67 PI, Jezebel the Conqueror from Pharaoh Festo sought to hold a monopoly on the Galdorium trade. My notes are over there, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. She sought to hold a monopoly and started hoarding Galdorium. Now, what's important to note here is that if we remember in Galdora, the canyons in the south are the lowest point in the world. Like, they're the lowest. So a lot of the mining, actually pretty much all of the mining, was happening down here in Ferrofesto, the passionate, power-hungry nation. It's happening here. They own the Galdorium trade. Mind you, this was the previous section of the middle of the earth where the nation of Gald currently is, was previously the best investment for money. Now they're mad because the trade has moved down here. So they're trying to expand their border south, take over some mines. Anura over here is just hanging out, trying to make sure everyone's peaceful. Peak oldest sibling vibes. Avplav is having the time of his life out here. He's just like making money, essentially. And then Utik is deeply concerned because Utik can see where this is all leading. So Utik gets their whole nation to essentially start reinforcing their underground city. So Jezebel the Conqueror starts hoarding supplies in 67 PI and 64 PI. Ganondorah the Good stands up to Jezebel the Conqueror in the Revolt of Good Testimony. Can you guess where Ganondorah the Good is from? Atlonia. Because she's trying to protect the peace. And then that revolt cascaded down into a full global conflict known as the Galdorium Wars. In 63 PI, yay! Yay! Fighting! Yeah, so it's not a good time. Nobody's really having fun. Except for Jezebel, hello. Except for Idlox. She's having the time of her life, strategizing about all of this. Now, 3 years later, in 60 PI, a strange event happens where the entire planet experiences a Galdora quake, an earthquake, but in Galdora. It shakes, it's not good. Everyone's like, hey, that was not a localized event. Because like Galdora quakes, like, they happen localized, but that was like a worldwide event. So the Robust Inventor Council immediately was like, hey, this isn't good. So they start investigating it. And that kind of rocks everyone. And so 2 years later, in 58 PI, Hintonori the Inventor, part of the Robust Inventor Council, discovers the consequences of mining Galdorium and projected planetary explosion in T-minus 58 years. On the dot. Good job, Hintonori. Hintonomi. Me when I don't even know the people I've named of names. Good job, Hintonomi. So this is when they're like, hey, we need to stop mining that because our planet will collapse. And Hintonomi, I think Hintonomi's from Univerk, but I don't know. I don't remember. Then in 57 PI, the second Galdora quake happens. And then in 55, the Robust Inventor Council has a global meeting, which is rare, where all of the inventors are called forth, and they try to make a plan to stop the planetary implosion. Because they're like, I like living here, not trying to make the world collapse, you know. In 54 PI, Jezebel the Conqueror is killed by Lux the Great, which kind of just like continues the conflict even further because her whole stash of Galdorium then gets passed into the black market and like, it's not good. It's not good. In 50 PI, Joanna the Good starts peace revolting. Can you guess where she's from? Atlonia. So she starts peace revolting because she's like, this is bad. This is not good. And it isn't. And she's like, I want no war. Which, in theory, it would be good if a war wasn't already happening. But the thought is there, you know? But this is not great because a year later, during one of these peace revolts. Fontanismo the Conqueror from, you guessed it, Ferrafesto, he brutally murders 12,000 people participating in a peace revolt in a moment, in an event called the Day of Red Flowers. The Day of Red Flowers, this actually does come back weirdly. This is this is Galdora, right? We have the Great Lake here, sea, caldera, canyons. Oh wait, there's 3 bumps. Canyons. This is where the Day of Red Flowers takes place. It's in between these 2 tributaries. Ferrafesto is up fighting here. This is Gald. This is Okayan, and that is Univerk. So it's like a big point of contention. All of this land has been fought over. Anura decided, or her people decided to, this is the wrong area. The one nation, like, not involved in this conflict decided to send peace revolts over to this area of main conflict, and then everyone died in a terrible massacre. And it was so bad that all of the flowers, mind you, this area is meadows, all of the flowers were dyed red, and then they adapted to become carnivorous. So now this entire area, not the entire area, but the area where that happened, the flowers are now lethal and carnivorous and will eat you. Fun fact, that was 49 PI. 47 PI, we have another Galdora quake. This is the 3rd one. And then the Robust Inventor Council finally decides on a plan in 45 PI. And their plan is to reach out to literally anything out there, anything beyond the scope of Galdora. They know they're in an isolated part of the galaxy or the universe. They know it's a shot in the dark, but that's the only thing they can do. They have this like satellite that they launch called Hope. They just launch it out into the excess of space. They have to build it first. We're in 45 PI right now. We still got time. In 42 PI, Fontanismo, the Conqueror, the guy who led the charge on the Day of Red Flowers and massacred a bunch of people, dies of a nosebleed. That's karma. And then in 40 PI, Galdorium mining is officially outlawed. That was, it started in 75? So that's 35 years after they started. It's officially outlawed. They passed it by some government process. Don't ask. The Robust Inventor Council did it. And this is when things start to get better. They start to get better. Because we still have some residual fighting going on. So like in 36 PI, Piratanto the Evil establishes an official Galdorian black market. Of course, because there's already Galdorium circulating, so there's going to be a black market. Gwenivin the Inventor then, 6 years later, in 30 PI, makes the first Galdorium detector, which effectively shuts down the black market because it, like 90% of the time, can detect Galdorium. And so it gets implemented everywhere. Good job, Gwenivin. And at that point, 3 years later, the Galdorium black market officially shuts down. And then in 26 PI, we enter an era that at the time was known as the Great Peace. Now, you might be asking, Patrick, why are we still counting down? Deeply concerned about that. If we just outlawed Galdorium mining, why are we still counting down to the implosion? Well, another Galdora quake hits in 13 PI, 13 years later. So we're in like a peaceful time and everything's going well for 13 years. But then a Galdora quake hits. And everyone's like, wait, is this residual? Like, we have to investigate this. Could this be from our mining? Like, it's still affecting it. So the Robust Inventor Council kind of like needs to investigate. They're like, okay, maybe it's just residual. Then 6 years later in 7 PI, another one hits. And then 2 years later in 5 PI, another one hits. And now everyone's like, hey, why are they getting more frequent? This doesn't make any sense. It would make sense if they were consistently happening around time, but they're not. They're happening like more frequently. So a year later, the Robust Inventor Council finally like fully meets, and they're like, hey, we need to deal with this. And so another quake happens in 2 PI, in 1 PI, a year before the implosion. We are now 1 PI. The Robust Inventor Council discovers that Quijomo the King, who is the current monarch of the nation of Gald, has secretly been mining Galdorium all these years. So the Great Peace ends and gets renamed to the Gilded Peace. In 1 PI, the Gilded Peace ends. It was 25 years long. Everyone say, thanks, Quijomo the King. Thanks for your ambition. You killed everyone. At this point, the Robust Inventor Council kind of like dusts off their project to send out satellites for just like any hope, and they launch all of them off because they're like, this isn't good. Our planet will probably be collapsing soon. And they were right. In 0 PI, we get the implosion. I've kind of talked about what this is before. The core of the planet folds in on itself, then it starts exploding out because that's like not good, and it expels the crust of Galdora out, snapping it into 7 large pieces and a bunch of other small ones. But then Halcyon's like, wait, they sent me a satellite they called Hope, like I should probably go stop something. That was just me being funny, but no. Halcyon actually was like, hey, the half Krunaku exists in this timeline, and I've already had so many timelines where something to this effect happened, and then everyone died. I want to try something different. So Halcyon halts the implosion, and is like, stop, and creates the gravitational anomaly in the center, and then everything just kind of halts. Some people are dead, some got ejected into space. The population dropped significantly, but there's still people. The Amethyst Mountains are no longer floating because the plate that was underneath them crashed into them when it was moving out. And so now they're just kind of sitting on the ground. Also, because the core of the planet is like gone, which kind of like gave them magic, there's a lot of imbalances in the world right now. So Okoye Okayon got hit the worst. That entire ocean is now cursed. It's on its own plate. The people who survived the best are from Univerk because they prepared for this. And so they live solely underground, but it's the top of, like, the northern part of the planet is now, like, totally barren and covered in snow. So it's like you can't live out there, so they all live underground. The people who were from Gald now exist on a plate called Pathara, and they went back to living in the Amethyst Geodes because they provide the most sanctuary. The people from Atlonia who were in the Caldera, in their like lush jungles, now that entire jungle is cursed and slowly decaying, and so it's not a great sight, but it's still okay because there's this one guy, Blight Branch. Didn't think I would be mentioning this. Blight Branch, who kind of like expelled a lot of his magical energy in order to save a lot of the forests, but that only lasts so long. So there is still negative impacts encroaching. there's like this one really, or rather small plate called Tento that's just like generally really foggy. No one really lives there. It's really kind of backrooms core. The meadow plate, Wendawar, is really pretty, but it is also decaying. That's probably the prettiest plate because it still has like all of its meadows. But yeah, it is like kind of decaying. Mangorum is effectively what Ferrofesto was, and now it's like a plate of outlaws. Oh, Fistery. That's what Atlonia is now. Vagath. That's what it is. That's the one with where Univerk was. Also, in the implosion, the Half-Kronaku got banished to the 4th dimension. They were trying to stop it, and in doing so, the impact of the implosion banished their 3rd dimensional selves, and now they no longer have contact with Galdora. So the Half-Kronaku are like gone. And then after that, some plate crashes happen, but this is where like there is some lore, but it has to do with more like of campaigns that were like started, never really finished. So there's a lot happening there. But that is basically all of the history, I think. Like, I feel like I'm not complete with everything, but that was like pretty much everything. So I think I'm gonna call it here for now. I could get in the weeds a little bit more about different communities or whatever. So I'm gonna call it here on the general lore. We hit the implosion and then now we're in modern times and now it's like, yeah. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to answer. And I know I have plot holes. You don't have to tell me, Patrick, you have plot holes. I know. So I hope you enjoyed, because I did. And this honestly helped me, it helps to verbalize things. I haven't even gotten to like religion or culture. I've literally just talked about history. All right, well, maybe next time. This is already long enough. Bye. Okay, if you're here, it means you watched the video all the way through, and I'm so sorry that I said effectively and essentially so many times. So many times. Don't know why I did that. Need to stop doing that. I've been sitting here editing, and I'm like, stop saying effectively and essentially. And whatever. I also love filler words. And I love dramatic pauses in my sentences. So I'm slowly realizing how much I actually suck at just talking to myself. Or thinking out loud. Should probably practice. But thanks for joining me. Bye!